Okay, good morning. We're going to be talking about Revelation chapter 19, verses 7 through 10. It's talking about the marriage supper of the Lamb. And as we have discussed in the previous couple of weeks, this is something that we all need to know about because we are going to be there. We're scheduled to be able to be there. Let me put it that way. Revelation 19, verses 7 through 10, marriage of the Lamb. It says, "Let us be glad and rejoice and give honor to him," talking about Jesus, "give honor to him, for the marriage of the Lamb is come, and his wife has made herself ready." Okay, here it says, the marriage of the Lamb, of the bride has come. The bride is the church. Paul tells us that he has espoused us to Christ as a pure virgin. So the church is a picture of the bride. Now, here he's talking about the marriage of the bride. Now, as we talked before, in the Jewish wedding ceremony, there was two invitations that went out. One went out for the marriage, and then 7 days later, that should ring a bell, seven years of tribulation. After a period of 7 days, a wedding or a supper invitation went out to come to the marriage supper of the Lamb. So today, when somebody's going to get married, you go to the wedding and they have the reception right after that. That's foreign to the Jewish way of thinking. They had the marriage, and then the bride and groom went into the chamber, and they were there by themselves. They were actually locked in the chamber for 7 days. And then talking with each other, they were allowed to come out, and they would go to the supper, the marriage supper. But there was an invitation that was sent for them to come to the marriage. And as we look at this as a picture of the church and everything, what would that invitation to come to the marriage be? What would that be a picture of? Close. The rapture. Come to the wedding. Come to the wedding. When all of the believers are going to be caught up together to go with Christ in the rapture. And the wedding takes place. The invitation is, God says, be ready. He's told us in Thessalonians to get ready because he could come at any time. That's our invitation to come to the wedding. Now, after the wedding in heaven with Jesus, there's a period of 7. That should ring a bell. 7 years of tribulation, right? When we're sequestered with Christ in heaven. Now, we're talking church here. I'm not talking Old Testament believers. I'm not talking the 144,000. I'm not talking about the martyrs that we've heard about that are under the... We're talking about just the Christian church that has been raptured. Those that are believers that are in the Christian church. Okay? They have a wedding. 7 years later, they have a wedding feast. And that's where we're at now. You notice, we just got done talking. He combines the two here. He says, "Let us be glad and rejoice and give honor to him, for the marriage of the Lamb has come." Not the wedding, not the feast, the marriage. "And his wife has made herself ready." The wife, which is the church, has not been made ready by Christ. She has made herself ready. Well, we don't have self-salvation. Jesus saved us. So how does the bride make herself ready? Let's look at verse 8. "And to her was granted that she should be arrayed in fine linen, clean and white, for the fine linen is the righteousness of Jesus." Right? No? It's righteousness of the saints. So the fine linen that we are covered with is the righteousness of the saints. Now, It does not say the righteousness of Jesus. Our salvation is through the righteousness of Jesus. But our clothes here, this fine linen and stuff, that comes through the righteousness of the saints. Say, that seems kind of odd. Remember in Revelation chapter 3 where he talks about the church of Sardis, I think it is, where he says that he will give them white garments. Who gets the white garments? The overcomers get the white garments. The overcomers also get the white stone. Remember that? So, depending upon our life now, it directly involves what our garments will be like then. It's the righteousness of the saints that is the garment. Now, if I have someone that's born again, and they live a selfish, self-centered life, and maybe they're involved with many isms. You pick the same. Is that person an overcomer? No. Do they receive the white garment? No. Only the overcomers receive the white garment. So this is a reward for living a Christian life during this time. This is not talking about heaven and hell, salvation and loss. This is totally outside. This is those that are going to be getting this white garment is the righteousness of the saints. Do you know any saints that don't have any righteousness in them? I know a couple. Now, this always brings us back to that same old discussion about person gets saved. Don't they receive Christ? Aren't their sins washed away? Aren't they made a child of God? Yes, to all them things. But how do they live their life after that? What does the parable of the prodigal son going and living in the pig pen, what does that teach us? There's a lot of Christians out there that want to live like the pigs in this world. And they may be born again because they're still sons of the Father. But it isn't until they get sick and tired of living in the pig pen that they come back and they say, Father, what can I do? And just to give you the whole parable of what Jesus said there, they come back, and remember the older son comes in and he says, Father, you never did anything for me. I was faithful. I was a faithful Christian. I done what you asked me to do. I was faithful to you and I tried to live for you. And he says, but you haven't given anything to me, and you've given your other son, you've given him all of this stuff, and I haven't got anything. And Jesus says, all that I have is thine. So if all that the Father has is to the obedient son, what does the disobedient son get? Zero. For an inheritance. We're not talking about not being a son anymore. We're talking about a son that gets no inheritance. Okay? That's critical important. And we're talking about the same kind of thing here. Okay? Because they've got the garment, which is the garment of their righteousness, their righteous living, their acts of righteous acts during their life. So, as a Christian, I should be looking for opportunities to do righteous acts because I am, in essence, buying the garment that God will use to allow me to go into the marriage supper of the Lamb. Not every believer will be able to be there. Only those that have the garment. Okay? Is that kind of, it's kind of confusing sometimes. Let me read a review of what I wrote here. I hope that this, I gave a lot of time to this to try to make it clear. The necessity of a place for those Christians that in this life don't obey Christ's word, or abuse other Christians, or fail to live in anticipation of Christ's return. So the place, it's critical to understand the application of these two parables of Jesus that we'll view today. We're going to look at two parables. One parable is about the wise and the foolish virgins. The other parable is about the talents. One guy was given 10 talents, another was given 5 talents, another gave 1 talent. Them two parables are some of the most avoided passages in the New Testament in Matthew chapter 25 because we fail to look at, he's talking about believers. Believers in both categories. In wise virgins, wise Christians, and foolish virgins, or foolish Christians. How many Christians you know that want to live foolishly? Well, I'm not going to do this. I don't know who's going to listen to this. I'll read on. These two parables in Matthew chapter 25, the 5 virgins and the investing of talents, helps us to understand what will be happening during the time of Christ's second coming, involving the marriage supper and Christ denying disobedient believers, or foolish believers, disobedient believers, a place at his banquet table. Their exclusion from the promised land, as typified in Moses' Exodus, requires a place of a wilderness residency that is in the New Testament often referred to a place of weeping and gnashing of teeth. This is where often many Christians they tried to turn this passage because it says weeping and gnashing of teeth. They try to say, well, that's hell, so somehow we got to get these people into hell, but they're servants of the Father. So they avoid it. Weeping and gnashing of teeth does not necessarily mean hell. There's 2 places in the Bible where it talks about weeping and gnashing of teeth, where it does mean hell. And that's in Revelation chapter 13, where it talks about believers, or it talks about, I'm sorry, let me go back and read. I just remember, it's not Revelation, it's in Matthew chapter 13, where the Lord talks about weeping and gnashing of teeth, and both times in that chapter, he uses it, weeping and gnashing of teeth, but he also includes the fire of judgment that's there at that time. So that clarifies it. We know absolutely it's talking about those that are in hell fire that are weeping and gnashing of teeth. Here, we're going to see today, there's weeping and gnashing of teeth, but it talks nothing about there being fire and being a place of fire. So we can see that this weeping, gnashing of teeth doesn't necessarily mean hell. Okay, I'm going to look into my example, because you told me, Clyde, that in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, that Paul said to look at the children of Israel coming out of Egypt, because that's our example for the church on what our life is to be like and what's to happen. We're supposed to look back there. Okay, so let's go to this weeping and gnashing of teeth then. Is there any time when we see that the children of Israel are weeping and gnashing of teeth because of not being able to go into the promised land? Yes. It says they mourned greatly, which is in Hebrew, they wept bitterly because they were condemned from going into the promised land. They had to go to the wilderness for 40 years. Remember that? So we see that a direct type. Believers, us, that are at this time, when we stand before the Lord and he says, you have to have a wedding garment. The Father has to give you a garment. And that garment is dependent upon the righteousness of the saints, not the righteousness of Christ. The righteousness of the saints. What have we lived for? What have we done? We are knitting a garment in heaven right now for us to wear at that time. And those that are without the garment are cast out into outer darkness. Do we see the type? Perfect type. This is perfect type. So, let's read on. I got a little distracted there, but let's read on.
Wait a minute. Are you saying that this garment is just for the reception? It's not for the marriage? Because
Right,
they're all
right.
getting married.
Right.
This is just the reception of the garment. Okay.
It says, this place should never, not talking about this wilderness where God has control. This place should never be confused with hell or the lake of fire. We are not talking about hell and lake of fire. We are talking about believers being thrown into or thrown out of the ability to rule and reign with Christ, and they go to the wilderness. We talked about that once before. Wanderings because of their disobedience. Those believers also that disobey Christ's teaching, as pointed out in these two parables, will forfeit the privilege to attend the marriage feast and rule and reign in the 1,000-year kingdom age, but instead will mourn greatly. That's your Numbers chapter 14 passage where it talks about they mourn, aka weeping and gnashing of teeth, and be without a reward of their inheritance. So is it important to understand who makes it into the marriage feast? Absolutely. Not every Christian, just because we're a believer, is going to make it into the marriage feast. We have to have the right garment. And the garment is the righteousness of the saints. There's so many things here. Boy, when you see a picture where God's painting, it's eye-opening. It's sobering. Because when we sit back, we think, wait a minute, I have a loved one here, or a loved one there, or a friend down the road, or something, and they claim to know Christ. They do nothing. They live a very ungodly type life. If they are born again, you will probably never see them at the marriage feast. They won't be there. They'll be in the wilderness. Okay, I'm going to read on a little bit. But 5 foolish virgins in Matthew chapter 25:12, he says, I know you not. All right, let's go there to Matthew chapter 25. Because what we're doing is marrying, I shouldn't use the word marrying. I'm comparing Revelation to Matthew chapter 25. You see, wait a minute, Mike, let's read this Matthew chapter 25. The parable of the 10 virgins. Then shall the kingdom of heaven be likened unto 10 virgins. I ask myself when I'm doing this, like, why does he pick 10 virgins? Why doesn't he pick 2 virgins? Why doesn't he pick, there's one virgin here and one virgin there, and one gets to go into the marriage supper and one doesn't? How come he picks 10? As I got to studying through this, there's actually 10 different, there's actually 5 different groups that will be in the wise virgins. We studied that last week. And there's going to be 5 groups that are going to be in the foolish virgins. So who are the wise that will be in the feast? Let me go on and read it. And 5 of them are wise and 5 are foolish. He doesn't say 5 are saved and 5 are lost. We're not talking lost and saved. We're talking about believers that are smart. Like, hey, I'm going to make something for me so when I get there, I got something. That's wise. Saying, no, I'm going to have my cake and eat it too right now, and I don't really care about what Jesus does later on because that's down the road. That's foolish. Because God is going to give us teaching. 5 of them are wise and 5 are foolish. Verse 3. They that were foolish took their lamps and took no oil with them. so they don't have any righteousness to take with them. But they took their lamps. But the wise took oil in their vessels with their lamps. So they had a little packet of oil. While the bridegroom tarried, what's that a picture of? The bridegroom is tarrying. That's the 7-year tribulation, right? While the bridegroom is tarrying, they all slumbered and slept. And at midnight there was a cry made, Behold, the bridegroom cometh, go you out to meet him. So we're not talking of the bride here. He's talking of these people that are going to go in as guests to the marriage supper. Let's look at several of them. We're not talking church here because remember the church is the bride. We're talking of those that are coming in as guests, those that are wise, the martyrs during the tribulation, not part of the church, but they're saved. They will be going to the marriage supper of the Lamb as guests. Their lamps are ready. The inhabitants of Jerusalem, 144,000, they will be invited into the marriage supper of the Lamb. So Jesus sets up this marriage supper of the Lamb right here on earth. I believe it's in Jerusalem. And those that are invited is the church that has made themselves, that have the right wedding garment, and these wise guests. Okay? Another one is the Old Testament believers. I'm thinking, wait a minute. He said 5 and 5. There must be a division of 5 different people groups in each one. 5 that are wise, 5 that are foolish. Okay, so Old Testament believers, they must be one of them. They're going to be going to the marriage supper of the Lamb, and as guests, their lamps are going to be right. The Jews at Petra, remember when we talked about, I think it was in Revelation 13, where it talks about the devil sends out a flood after the Jews when they're fleeing, and God opens the ground and swallows up the water, and they go into Petra, and God protects them there for 3.5 years, 1,260 days. Remember that? These people are also going to be in the marriage supper of the Lamb. They're not going as a bride. They're going as not during the church age. So, we're talking church age people is the bride, and those that, these are non-church age type people. The last one will be the worldwide believers that are watching. He tells us, and a lot of times the Christian church uses this word, Jesus says, watch, for you don't know the day or the hour when the Son of Man will come. That actually is not referring to the rapture. We are to watch for the rapture too. That's another passage. But that particular passage is talking for watching for the end of the tribulation. Watch for Jesus' coming 1,260 days after the Antichrist declares himself to be God. So if you're at 1,259 days, you better be watching. And if you are watching, you get to participate in that blessing of going into the marriage feast. There's actually 5 different groups that the Bible refers to. And I thought, isn't this amazing? We looked at 5 wise and 5 foolish virgins, and it just so happens the Bible teaches of 5 different categories of people. And the church would make the 6th category, wouldn't it? What's the number of man? 6. You see how God, it is so beautiful. All these things fit together. God uses all the numerical things all together. Now, we had talked about all of these here, but we wanted to get into the foolish virgins. Now, again, we're not talking of the church here. We're talking of foolish virgins. These are people that are not going to be in the marriage supper. Let's read on. Okay? And at midnight the cry, in verse 6, at midnight the cry was made, Behold, the bridegroom comes, go ye out to meet him. Then all of those virgins arose and trimmed their lamps. And the foolish said to the wise, Give us of our oil, and pay close attention to the next few words, for our lamps are gone out. Many Bible teachers, good Bible teachers, will tell you, oh, these are lost people. Lost people don't have lamps that have gone out. Lost people have lamps that at one time were alive and bright and shiny. What did Jesus say? We're to take our light and not hide it under a bushel. Let your light so shine before men. They didn't. They had no righteous acts. But they had, at one time, had a light in their lamp, because their lamps had gone out. So at one time, they were obedient believers. They were somebody that asked the Lord, come into my heart, forgive me my sins, and they humbly bowed before the Lord, and their lamp was lit. And then they had no righteous acts to go with it, and their lamps went out. Does that make sense? Okay? This is important, because when you hear someone teaching on this, remember, they said the lamps are gone out. That's important to know that. For the wise answered, saying, I'm not going to give you, he says, not so, lest there be not enough for us and you, but go rather to them that sell and buy oil for yourselves. In other words, go and make some righteous acts yourself. Go and become, because what did we say? That the garment was the righteous acts of the saints. Here, the righteous acts of the saints is this oil. Okay? Afterwards came, verse 11, afterwards came the other virgins saying, Lord, Lord, open to us. Well, I skipped verse 10. Verse 10, and while they went to buy, the bridegroom came, and they that were ready went in with him to the marriage, and the door was shut. Oftentimes, Bible teachers would say, the door's shut, you couldn't get to heaven, you can't be saved. It doesn't fit. It's not fitting there. This is talking about somebody that is a believer that does not have any righteous living, that can't go into the wedding feast because he doesn't have any light in his candle, in his lampstand. Doesn't have any light from it. So he's left out. Verse 11. Afterwards came also the other virgins, saying, Lord, Lord, open us. But he answered and said, Verily I say unto you, take a look at these next words. This is where a lot of people get tripped up too. I know you not. Remember when Jesus said, depart from me, you the workers of iniquity. I never knew you. Remember that? This is not the same. It's a different Greek word. He doesn't say, I never knew you. He says, I know you not. That word that's being used there is, I'm not looking at you. So Jesus is saying, you that have lived your unrighteous life during this time on this earth, and your light is going out, you've had no witness to anybody. Your light has gone out, and you want to go into the wedding supper, but first of all, you don't have the right garments, you haven't made the right garment, and now you don't have any light, you aren't ready for me, and you have lived a selfish, ungodly life. You've done all that during that time, and now you can't make it in. Now you want to know if you can get in, and Jesus says, I'm not looking at you. He's not saying, I never knew you. Remember the workers of iniquity. He said, I never knew you. Depart from me, you workers of iniquity. I never knew you. Here, he's using the word no, but in that Greek, he's talking about, I'm not looking at you. Wouldn't that be sobering to be a believer during that time and have the God of all eternity that died on the cross for you? And you say, Lord, I'd like to go into the marriage supper. Can I get in there, Lord? And he says, I'm not even looking at you. He's not saying you're not my son. He's saying, I'm so ashamed of you. I'm not looking at you. I'm not even going to pay attention to you. Have you ever had your mom, when you've done something wrong, and you say, Mom, oh, I don't know if I ever did anything wrong. But if I did do something wrong, and I go to Mom, can't I get the ice cream today? Can I get the ice cream? She says, you're going to get stopped and buy an ice cream. And driving down the road, there's the ice cream. Hey, Dad, you drove by the ice cream place. Ma, you drove by. She just keeps right on going, doesn't even look at you. That's what's happening. Jesus is ignoring. He says, I'm not even looking at you. You have been so bad. You have been so disobedient and unfaithful as a believer. I'm not even looking at you. That's a sober thought. Sober thought. Watch therefore, for you know neither the day or the hour wherein the Son of Man cometh. He says. Now I want to read the next parable down there, because this comes to the point where we're talking about weeping and gnashing of teeth. Okay? Pay attention and listen to who the servants are, what the Father does for each one of the servants. And we know in order to be a servant of God, you have to be born again, right? That's a person that's born again. So let's read on verse 14. For the kingdom of heaven is like a man traveling into a far country. Who would this be? A man traveling into a far country? It'd be Jesus, right? He's left the earth, he's gone, and he's traveled to the far country, he's gone to heaven, who called his own servants. Don't let that miss you. He called his own servants. Are these the lost? No, these are saved. He's using this parable to teach the saved, born again. And delivered unto them his goods. And unto one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1. To every man according to his several ability, and straightway he took his journey. So Jesus gave us, he says, all power is given unto me in heaven and in earth. Go you into all the world and preach the gospel. So Jesus said, all power is given unto you. I'm giving all power to you. He breathed on them and they received the Holy Ghost. He gave everything to us. Straightway he took his journey. Verse 16. Then he that had received the 5 talents went and traded. Oh, I just messed up. Messed up right there. He received 5 talents, verse 16, and went and traded with the same and made them other 5 talents. So he took 5 talents and he made 5, now he's got 10. And likewise, he that had received 2, he also gained other 2. But he that had received 1 went and digged in the earth and hid his Lord's money. After a long time, the Lord of those servants cometh and reckoneth with them. Is he talking believers or unbelievers here? These are his servants, right? Obviously, he's talking about believers. So one believer is given 5 talents, one given, what is it, 3? 2. And the other one is given 1 talent, and he goes and buries it. He does nothing with it. Doesn't get any. See, Christ is looking for a return in our life. He's looking for dividends. He's not looking for just being a Christian and getting along. He wants to see production. He wants to see increase. He's given us something. He wants to. That's what this whole thing is about. Okay, verse 19. After a long time, the Lord of those servants cometh and reckoneth with them. And so he that had received 5 talents came and brought the other 5 talents. And Lord, thou deliverest unto me 5 talents. Behold, I have gained beside them 5 more. And his Lord said to him, Well done, thou good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of thy Lord. He's going to make him a ruler over many things. When does that happen? The 1,000-year reign of Christ, right? When he divides to us the authority or the privilege to rule and reign with him. He gets 5, he gets a blessing by the Lord, and he receives 5 more talents during that time. Okay, verse 22. And also, he also that had received 2 talents came and said, Lord, thou deliverest unto me 2 talents. Behold, I have gained 2 other talents beside them. The Lord said, and it's repeated exactly the same. Well done, good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of the Lord. So the Lord gives somebody a whole lot of talents, and they double. And God says, good job, you're a good servant. A guy gets fewer talents and he doubles that. Still isn't the same. One guy gets, but the blessing is the same. Enter in, you're a good servant, you've done good. Now he goes on. Then he which had received one talent came and said, Lord, I knew thee that thou art a hard man. Do believers nowadays know that Jesus is going to be a hard man? He's going to be hard to please, isn't he? Hard man. I knew that thou art a hard man, reaping where thou didst not sow, and gathering where you did not straw. I was afraid, and I went, I hid the talent in the earth. And lo, there thou hast that which is thine. So go get it. It's over there, Lord. That talent I buried. I didn't do anything with it. I didn't do anything for you, but what you gave me was basically right here. This is all I got. The Lord answered him, thou wicked and slothful servant. He calls him lazy. You lazy, worthless servant. Thou knowest that I reap now where I sow not, and gather what I did not straw. Thou oughtest therefore to have put my money to the exchangers, and then at the evening I should have reckoned to receive usury or interest. You could have taken the money and put it in the bank. Take therefore the talent from him, and give it unto him that had 5 or 10 talents. For unto every one that hath shall be given, and he shall have an abundance. But to him that hath not shall be taken away even that which he hath. So a believer that comes and does not live for the Lord, even that abilities that they have during this life, that will be taken away. Now, this is the part where, take a look at the next verse. And cast you the unprofitable servant into outer darkness, and there shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Why would they be weeping and gnashing of teeth? Because they know what they could have had. They know what they could have had. Had they given their life entirely to Christ in this life, and they had the righteous acts of the saints, they could have had that. Instead, they're thrown into the outer darkness, and there's weeping and gnashing of teeth. Now, I want you to get the picture of this, because weeping and gnashing of teeth is going to be used in various Bible studies you're going to be confronted with. So go to Matthew chapter 13, and let's look at the weeping and gnashing of teeth of those that are not saved. Here, we're talking weeping and gnashing of teeth, but in chapter 13, Jesus tells the parable, and then in verse 11, I'm not sure where. No, it wasn't waiting for you, Tares in verse 36. Let's go to verse 36. Then Jesus sent the multitude away and went into the house, and his disciples came to him and declare unto us the parable of the tares of the field. Jesus told them that the tares of the field would be those of the kingdom, would be sown right alongside of those that are lost. Okay? And he says, he that sows the good seed is the Son of Man, the field is the world, and the good seed is the children of the kingdom, but the tares are the children of the wicked one. Children of the wicked one. The enemy that sowed them is the devil, and the harvest is the end of the world, and the reapers are the angels. So he's given, and he says, as therefore the tares are gathered and burned in the fire, so shall be in the end of this world. The Son of Man shall send his angels, and they shall gather out of his kingdom all things that offend, and them which do iniquity, and shall cast them into a furnace of fire. And there shall be wailing and gnashing of teeth. So when we see somebody cast into a furnace of fire, now we're talking about hell. This is not the same gnashing of teeth that we've seen in Revelation, or Matthew chapter 25. They're weeping in Matthew chapter 25, but here in chapter 13, they're weeping because they are in the furnace of fire. Down in verse 40, he says, verse 49, so shall it be in the end of the world. The angels shall come forth and sever the wicked from among the just, and they shall cast them into the furnace of fire, and there shall be wailing and gnashing of teeth. In both instances, he's talking about those that are unbelievers at the end of the world. This isn't at the second coming of Christ when he sets up the kingdom before. This is at the end of the 1,000-year reign. There's going to be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And he uses the reference to furnace both times. Okay? And I wanted to, let's stop that